When I saw that LEGO was releasing a smart brick, I was pretty excited. Not to play with it or anything like that, but for what's inside. I was reading about how they designed the brick and I was intrigued when it talked about a bespoke silicon ASIC chip that was custom designed for this application. My silicon doodle senses started tingling and I thought there was a good chance that there might be something on here, so I had to pick one up. Normally, the only way to get a brick is if you get one of these 3 complete LEGO sets that includes it. As luck would have it, someone was already selling single smart bricks on eBay. It's not as expensive as buying a whole set, but I'm trying not to wonder too much about where these single bricks are coming from. The brick is made with 2 main pieces, the transparent top piece and a black plastic bottom shell. Something that I noticed during my teardown of this brick is that each piece has its own copyright date. For example, the black plastic shell has a copyright date from 2022. On one of the short ends of the brick is a notification not to throw it away. On the opposite end of the brick, there is a window which has a side-mounted LED and a tiny prism that allows light to be reflected onto a photodiode. As it turns out, these 2 pieces are very well attached. I initially tried to separate them with a razor blade along the seam, but it didn't look like it was working. I instead used the brute force method and chipped away at the bottom edges first to remove the bottom plate, which exposes the battery. Once the bottom plate was removed, the sides mostly just peeled away. What's left is a very complex assembly. This assembly is actually made from 2 different pieces of plastic that easily separate from each other, but doing so breaks an electrical connection between them. The top piece of plastic houses a speaker that makes contact with the PCB below with spring leads, and the third connection was soldered to the edge of the PCB, but it's now broken. There's also a hole here that lines up with a microphone on the PCB below. The other piece of plastic houses a multi-layer PCB, the battery, and is wrapped with a very intricate pattern of copper wires. These wires are used to sense things like proximity to nearby tags and other smart bricks, and these are likely used to handle the wireless charging for the battery. The ends of the wires are precisely terminated to spots on the edge of the PCB that have been plated, essentially the same process that I used to have my PCB coins fabricated. The copper wires are bonded directly to these pads without the use of solder, and instead are likely bonded with heat and pressure. On the top side of the PCB, there are only a few components, which include 2 RGB surface mount LEDs, the microphone, and 1 side mount RGB LED. This RGB LED is used with the photodiode on the other side of the PCB to sense colors of objects that are pressed up against the brick. Unfortunately, to get access to the PCB and see what's on the other side, these wires must be removed. I pulled on each wire and the majority of the wires broke, leaving the bond intact, but there were a few that separated from the PCB entirely, which I thought was interesting. I do like the fact that the housing has features designed specifically for the wires to rest on and guide them. The last thing that needs to be removed is the battery, which is spot welded to posts on the backside of the PCB. The PCB is held so tightly in this carrier that I did have to remove some of the plastic on the corners in order to remove it. After removing the PCB, we can see that this holder has a copyright date of 2023. With the PCB removed, we can finally get a clear view of what's on the backside, and there's quite a few parts here. Thanks to a teardown that Reddit user Psychological Yak 4619 has already posted over on Reddit, I don't have to do too much digging to figure out what each piece is. Overall, there are a few main components in this design. The bespoke silicon ASIC mentioned before is the big silicon chip on the left. On the right is the EM9305, a Bluetooth SoC. There is a 48 MHz crystal connected to this Bluetooth chip, and there's also 2 more additional silicon chips that need to be identified. The next step is to remove all these parts from the circuit board so I can throw them under the microscope to take a closer look. Since all these parts are soldered to the board, it's really easy to remove them with just some hot air. A common theme in this video is that sometimes these components become airborne and eject themselves across my workbench, as is the case with this tiny chip here. Thankfully, there weren't any other casualties extracting the rest of these components, unless of course you count the slightly burnt photodiode. I decided to start by looking at the bespoke ASIC, which according to Psychological Yak 4619 is a custom design from Dialog Semiconductor, which is now owned by Renesas. This seems plausible, but I did not see a Dialog Semiconductor logo on this chip, or at least anything that I would recognize as one. Instead, there is some partially obscured text that looks like it says CSEM along with CASSAL, with some additional text after that. If you've got any ideas what this might refer to, please let me know, as I've come up empty-handed in my searches. Overall, the features on this chip are incredibly tiny, and I can't see much detail even at 500 times magnification. I'm pretty sure that these repeating grids of rectangles are a type of fill pattern that are used to help keep layers flat during fabrication. They also have the unfortunate side effect of obscuring the majority of the circuits below. Speaking of obscuring stuff, some of the solder balls merged together with each other and prevented the full circuit from being viewed. I can try and clean this up a bit with a soldering iron, but it's always a possibility that I'll damage the chip in the process. In the other corner is some other text, which I initially thought was the Sakaguchi Genetics logo, but I think I must have just been playing too much Marathon recently. I don't actually know what this is either. Just in case the solder balls were hiding something, I decided to clean up the chip. There is a polyamide layer that helps protect the circuits underneath, but it can still be damaged as well. I used some no clean flux and a clean tip to wick up the solder from each ball. It's a tedious process, but I did remove the majority of the solder. As a side effect of this cleaning, the chip is now dirtier and it's harder to see things clearly. I was really hoping there was going to be a Lego brick or minifig doodle on this chip, but after thoroughly looking, it doesn't look like they included one, at least that I can see. It's definitely a missed opportunity if you ask me. Next, I wanted to take a closer look at the crystal used by the Bluetooth chip. This is definitely the smallest oscillator that I tried to open, and I had to use tweezers while I sanded off the top. Unfortunately, right after I took this video, it ejected itself into orbit before I could remove the lid. While looking for it on my basement floor, I did somehow manage to find the previously lost silicon chip, so I guess it's a win. It's also a miracle that I didn't step on this and crush it or roll over it with my chair. This thing is super tiny and only has 6 solder balls on it. The top has the markings F0BN and 606476 with a plus sign circled, which I imagine is either a logo or denoting the pin 1's location. The bottom side is pretty boring overall, with only the 6 solder balls connecting to vias that must take the signals to the other side. This got me thinking, and I needed to look at the edge to confirm my theory. And sure enough, there appears to be multiple silicon pieces connected together here. I would then assume that this is very likely a MEMS accelerometer and or gyroscope combo. I didn't try to crack it open since it's so small, and because I already have so many silicon shards everywhere, so it will have to remain a mystery for now. Next, I took a look at the other small silicon chip. This one has the markings for A5J and JIQ, which I'm sure means something to somebody. Given the fact that this chip has 8 solder balls, and combined with the types of structures underneath and the location of it on the PCB, it leads me to believe that this is some type of additional flash storage. This is different from psychological Yaks analysis, where they believe this to be a power management IC or voltage regulator, but it looks a little bit more flashy to me than a power device. I definitely could be wrong though. It certainly could be a power management IC with the flash area used to store program data or other information. Like with the bespoke ASIC, the features on this chip are also extremely hard to see even with 500 times magnification. Last up is the Bluetooth SoC, which first needs to be extracted from its epoxy package. These tiny QFN parts are always hard to work with, and as I was peeling back the lead frame, the silicon chip catapulted itself into the abyss. I did eventually find it after looking for some time, but it tragically suffered some damage during extraction. This does allow us to see some of the lower layers that would normally be obscured, so maybe it's not too horrible, but I still would have liked to see the complete chip. As is the case with the other chips we've looked at in this video, the circuits are largely obstructed by the upper layers. At least for this part, there's no solder balls blocking our view. Where the chip broke, you can really get a sense of just how many layers are on this part. For example, right here, there appears to be 5 different layers, but there are likely many more. Just like with the other chips, the features are extremely small, and many of them start to blur together even at 500 times magnification. These small features do yield a very beautiful view with plenty of different colors, which I really enjoy. Also near the break line is an inductor, which is very common to see in Bluetooth chips like these. These inductors are cool because they're actually made using multiple layers. This chip appears to have what looks like a date of April 2023, which makes it a pretty recent design. In the other undamaged corner is the part number. I try not to think about what may have existed in the missing corners. But that's pretty much it. Overall, it's unfortunate there were no LEGO-themed doodles or Easter eggs hiding in this part, but I was still impressed with the overall engineering efforts that went into creating this smart brick. It's hard to say if the smart bricks are here to stay, but I feel like it's a good platform to iterate on and it has a lot of potential from what I've seen. If there's ever an updated version with a new bespoke silicon ASIC, I'll have to take a look at that one as well. I hope you enjoyed this teardown and let me know what your thoughts are on the smart bricks in the comments down below. If you want to support my work, the easiest way is to subscribe here on YouTube or leave a comment. You can also get a PCB coin or other things like silicon wafers over on my online store. You can also join the Chip Chat Discord server and come hang out and see what I'm working on before it ends up in a video. Thanks again for your support.